Hello. So the other day, I was just playing around, and first of all, you couldn't really see my face. So I swapped things around a little bit, and here we are. So I've got one fan. See what I did there? It was representative of humour, I'll have you know. Jimmy was asking me about triplets, and playing with triplets, it depends on what kind of groove you're playing. So the first groove that I played there was taking an eighth note groove and then taking big triplets that go across it. So either taking like a quarter note triplet, which would be 3 in the space of 2. So what do I mean by that? Well, now the point here is that this is a basic polyrhythm, and I always thought of it, I was taught it by going eggs and bacon, eggs and bacon, eggs and bacon, eggs and bacon. And it just helps, especially when you start to teach kids, to actually get into combinations like this, because if you just play it on its own, it can actually be a little bit intimidating if somebody doesn't know how to play triplets. So the fundamental thing that you're actually after is understanding. So it doesn't really matter how you get that understanding, as long as it comes across. The other day I was talking about the necessity to understand how to count, and the same thing can be true with triplets. Now, I'm not going to delve real deep into the counting of it, but I will give you 2 options. Now, as I started to go through counting, I was actually counting using one particular way of doing it, which was 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that was great, except it actually did cause a bit of confusion when I got to playing 16th notes, which is 1 E and 2 E and Now that's because there's 1 and included in 1 E and so it doesn't necessarily stick that there's a different feel to that grouping, and for that reason I chose to go back to the old tried and tested type of counting, which was 1 triplet, 2 triplet, and that is what I teach most people today. The idea with counting is that you can identify where every note is, and it makes your life a lot easier. Now, understanding counting is a central tool. That's what it is. It's a tool. It's a means to an end. Now, once you've actually understood it, then just like doing a gig, what you actually want to do is you want to get used to the music so that you can actually, I want to say churn it out, but you want to play it and you want to feel comfortable with whatever it is you're playing. Now, in terms of triplets, every drummer owes a debt of gratitude to the old jazz drummers. And when you start to look back at what they did, as I mentioned last time, Buddy Rich was quite an amazing player, but he was also a pioneer, in what he did and what Gene Krupa did and where they got all their information from, if you want to go back to Dave Tuff and Baby Dodds and all those guys. But you've got to pay attention to who those people were and go back and look at your history. But moving forward, if you're thinking about playing triplets and you're thinking about jazz, now that then gets traditionally played 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4. And then I'll put the bass drum and the snare and hi-hat in. As you start to get used to the feel of it, then you start to hear that triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, continually going. Now, a great exercise is to actually take the snare drum and just play that over and over and get used to it. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Now, what happens here, I will put the bass drum and the hi-hat in. 1, 2, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 4 triplet. Now that will give you a basic triplet feel. Once you get comfortable with that, then I started by getting into Buddy Rich and seeing how he played things like a lot of this seemed wow, because it's crossovers and it's kind of flash and it's cool. So how do you break it down? It's actually very simple, and just like anything else that you learn, once you actually play it over and over, you'll start to feel much more at home with it. Now, the way you start that, bearing in mind that everything is like 3 notes. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. So that's the first one you've got to get used to. Putting the number up on the tom-tom and the triplet on the snare drum. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. The next one is to put the number on the tom-tom and the triplet down here. So 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. And then you mix them up by doing 1 from the snare, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Sorry, I confused it a bit by going back to the snare a little earlier. I started thinking musically. I've got to stop that. So 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. The other exercise that I did was 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, where I'm just playing the number on the deep tom. Now you can play around with all of the combinations, and really once you do, you start to, well, first and foremost, hopefully, once you settle into what it is, you allow yourself the time to actually have some fun. I know that I spent so many years actually playing through stuff and going through and making a pig's ear of it. And it was all down to me not taking the time that was really necessary for me to do it so that it was under my hands. so that I was feeling that I was comfortable with what I was doing. And I think we're all, well, maybe just a little bit guilty of this, because we get carried away with what we're playing. I remember talking to a mate, a famous drummer, some years ago, who reminded me when we were much younger, how we used to take a Steve Gadd lick and we'd play it over and over, and we might not get it right, and we'd go at it and at it and at it, and we'd be practicing 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, and we hadn't actually got it right. And that was the point. We were practicing it wrong. We were getting it wrong continually. And that is what became part of our play. Now, as much as it may have been flawed as far as the original combination we were trying to practice is concerned, it did actually allow us to play a combination around the kit, and it was catching on our ear. So just the fact that we had our own variation, and that's what it is, it's a variation. Very often we think this is wrong. Well, to all intents and purposes it was, but the point is we'd practiced and we'd gotten familiar with something. It's really at that point you need a teacher to be able to identify what it is you're doing. Once you get into understanding different players, their different style, and then you start taking it on board, it really then starts to make a difference to who you are as a player. It might not be a perfect Steve Gadd copy or Billy Cobham, or for me, you know, Gavin Harrison, Simon Phillips, Stevie White, you know, great British drummers. It really is at the point where you start to bring in what you're doing to another gig. That is when it makes the difference to you. Look, I consider myself to be a great drummer. I'm sorry, I've got no false modesty here. But when it comes to teaching, it's got nothing to do with me. It's got everything to do with my experience, but it's got nothing to do with me. It's got everything to do with giving somebody that light in that blue touch paper so they get an idea of how they're going to move forward. As a wise man once said to me, "I feel sorry for you, son." And I said, "Why's that?" And he was a great drummer too. He used to work with me, mum and dad. He said, "Because I've been down this road and I know all the pitfalls that you're going to go through, and I wish you well going through and understanding it." And I have, and I was grateful for that advice. It was one of the things that started to make me realise that a little humility goes a long way. So that's today's tip on triplets. Hope you liked it, mate. It's one of those things that from day to day I'm going to try and bring in so that you get an idea. So if you've got any questions about any of this, I'd be absolutely delighted to answer it on another day. Maybe we will get to 9/8, although that's probably going to wait for the launch of the big new website that I'm kind of involved with, and my online thing is going to be part of. I can't really talk too much about it as much as I want to, because I've given my word, and I'm afraid that's who I am. So I don't go back on it. But if you like this, please just give me a little like below. If you've got any questions, please ask the questions. I'll be delighted to answer them, and hopefully I'll be able to talk to you and maybe show you one or two more things next week, probably about Monday or Tuesday. So stay practicing, have a great weekend, and I'm going to get out of this basement for 5 minutes. Cheers.